Good morning and thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. I'm Josh Hinkle. This morning we'll take a closer look at the State of Texas school funding. A little later we'll speak with Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Whether you have students in school or pay taxes, these changes matter to you. This week we got to see the specifics of a new formula for calculating how much money districts have to spend. If approved, the state would end up pumping an extra $3 billion into public education. Some districts like Lake Travis and Lago Vista ISDs won't benefit much, not a single dollar more. But other districts see a big change. 4% more money in Round Rock, 5% more in Pflugerville, and 6% increase in the Eanes ISD. The biggest winner by far, though, was Austin ISD. As KXAN's Robert Hadlock shows us, the district could have 7.5% more money to use.
It's going towards education. Why not?
As David Porto waited to pick up his daughter at Austin High School, he said extra state funding could make a difference. Under the proposed school finance model, Austin ISD could have an extra $48 million to work with in 2016.
I think all the schools should be equal. You know, they should all be able to teach the same way and have same resources. So I think that's why all schools, down from elementary to high school, should be equal.
That was pretty much Austin ISD's argument to lawmakers. While the district has a strong tax base, Austin sends the most money of any district to the state. It's money they argue schools need here. Nearly 2/3 of students are economically disadvantaged. For 1 in 3, English is not their first language.
It's not so much about the money going here and there. It's about having a quality teacher in every single classroom. That's a guaranteed way to make sure that kids are going to learn and excel.
Superintendent Paul Cruz says his first priority will be to increase pay and benefits to recruit and keep the best teachers and staff.
We, compared to our schools in our area, we're not ranked as far as being very competitive with compensation for our teachers. And so we know that's a significant area of need for us.
No matter what, any celebration may be premature. Texas lawmakers have to approve the plan. Remember, this comes as dozens of school districts, including Austin and Round Rock, sue the state, claiming the school finance system is unfair and insufficient. House Education Chairman Jimmy Don Aycock says if this plan passes and is funded fully, that could essentially end the lawsuit.
I can't imagine going forward with it if we did this.
Is that why you did this?
No. It's certainly a factor, but we did it trying to do what's best for 5.2 million kids.
Like we said, some districts win and others sort of lose out under the proposed formula. You can see how your district stands with this story on KXAN.com. While all of that was going on, state senators approved several bills that would give parents more power to move their children to a different school. One creates vouchers for low-income and disabled students to go to private schools. Others affect teacher training and pay and school management. This week, state lawmakers also approved one plan to boost pre-kindergarten programs, adding an extra $1,500 more per student. It calls for more teacher training, student assessments, and parent-teacher conferences, but it does not necessarily expand coverage or provide full-day pre-K. Those against it, mainly Tea Party Republicans, say pre-K should already be high quality and believe this is part of a bigger agenda to pave the way for universal pre-K. Some parents worry the bill will kill the federal program in Texas.
We face people, politicians, representatives at both levels, state and federal, that don't understand the plight of the underprivileged.
This bill is in line with Governor Greg Abbott's campaign promise. Remember, every one of those proposals needs approval in the chamber. Next on State of Texas In Depth, the man leading the Senate. We go one-on-one with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Welcome back to State of Texas In Depth. With just under 50 days to go this legislative session, leaders are working to pass as many bills as possible. Of course, that means tackling some controversial issues. My guest this morning knows all of this very well, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. Welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Great to be back, Josh.
You guys have been busy.
We have been busy. We are setting a record pace in the Senate. The top 20 bills are the Lieutenant Governor's numbers. It means high priority that people want us to pass and senators want to pass out of about 5,000 bills. By the time This week ends probably, or early next week, we will be 14 or 15 bills out of that 20. That compares to 2 or 3, I believe, last session. I give all the credit to the senators. The committee chairmen are working hard. And we're just doing what we said we'd do in the campaign, addressing border security, property taxes, business taxes, Second Amendment issues, transportation issues, education issues. We're doing what the people ask us to do, and that's what we were elected for. Not just myself, but Governor Abbott and the new senators.
We started the session talking heavily about border security.
Yes.
How is that playing out in the budget process right now?
Well, we will pass the Senate budget off the floor this week. The House passed their budget over, and in our budget we have $800 million for border security. The House has about $400 million. We're going to be spending more to secure our border in this session for the next 2 years, and we've spent pretty much in the last 6 or 7 years. I feel very good about our program. It's a focus on personnel, keeping the guard there until we can hire more DPS officers. It's been very effective what we've done since Governor Perry sent the guard to the border last year. We've seen our apprehensions go down considerably. That means fewer people are crossing, but we have to be prepared for another busy spring and summer as we had last year with a lot of young people coming over. So we can't step back. It's not about the immigration issues. That's for Washington to decide. For us in Texas, it's about public safety. And that's what we're focused on, technology, equipment, and personnel. And again, we're going to fight for that in the Senate. Again, there's a big difference. We're spending $400 million more than the House, and we're going to fight for every dollar of that.
You say public safety, but I couldn't help but notice in a border security subcommittee this week,
yes,
there was a tuition bill having to do with repealing the DREAM Act, which gives tuition to undocumented immigrants.
Right. Well, the reason it was in that committee was it deals with people who are crossing the border illegally. And, you know, we talked about this during the campaign, and, you know, at the end of the day, Josh, we received, the exit polls show us over 50% of the male Hispanic vote and 46% of the overall Hispanic vote in Texas. And people said, well, Dan, how did that happen? It's because it doesn't matter if you're Anglo, African-American, Mexican-American, Hispanic, it doesn't matter, Asian-American, it doesn't matter. We know there's a sense of fairness that even though we have great understanding of children brought here illegally, through no fault of their own, and they've gone to school, is that an American citizen's child, an American citizen, should have the first opportunity over someone who's here illegally. And we're not talking about saying to youngsters who have come here illegally that you can't go to college. We're just saying you can't get in-state tuition. And the way to really get your arms around this, understand that issue, imagine, let's just say there's a Mexican-American family in Oklahoma, and their son or daughter wants to come to Texas. Why should an American citizen from Oklahoma pay more than someone who's come here illegally? It doesn't make any sense. It's not fair. So I have a solution. I've just told the universities, quit charging out-of-state tuition, and you eliminate the problem. They don't seem to want to do that.
I don't think they like that very
No,
much.
I don't think they'd want to do that.
But how do those undocumented immigrants, how do they afford college, though? You say they can come here and still go to college, but how do many of them afford it?
Well, how does an American citizen afford it? I mean, look, again, it's just a question of fairness. And look, these kids who have come here, again, these are kids who were brought here. They didn't, you know, their parents brought them here illegally. They're obviously good kids. They finished school. They want to go on and have a successful career. But we're telling them the big lie, by the way, Josh, because if you are here illegally and you get a college degree and go to work for a company, companies probably aren't going to hire them because they don't have any citizenship. So we need to straighten this out. The federal government needs to straighten it out. But right now it just needs to be a question of fairness. They can go to any college. They just have to pay out-of-state rates, but they can go to community college, and there's virtually no difference between in-state or out-of-state, like a lot of American citizens. So it's just an issue of fairness. And look, in my campaign, it was a center point of my campaign, and the people supported that across a wide spectrum. So it's we have several thousand students who that applies to in Texas. We're not anti-anyone, and we're not against those students, but it just needs to be straightened out. And even you know, the governor said we need to address some of those issues. You know, we'll see if there's support to pass it all the way through and get it to the governor's desk. But it has taken the first step.
Well, clearly it has support on the Senate side, but many people say that it doesn't really seem like it's going to go through the House. You've got Joe Strauss there who has supported it in the past. Governor Perry supported it. What does it really say about that leadership there?
I don't make questions about my fellow leaders. I have to work with them, and I don't criticize them or praise them. I just work with them. Well, I praise them when they pass Senate bills, but that's it. You know, look, my job is to be president of the Senate, and that's my job. I can't control what happens in the House. No different than the House when they send us bills they can't control what happens in the Senate.
Well, let's keep talking about education.
Sure.
One of the things you have supported that is going through the Senate is the school idea of having campuses graded A
Yes.
through F.
Yes.
What's that about?
Last session, I was education chair, as you know, and I passed a bill that grades our school districts now A through F. Because right now, our school districts and our schools were graded as being acceptable or unacceptable. So if you're a parent and your child is in an acceptable school, let me ask your parent, is acceptable an A or is it a C+? Is unacceptable a C- or an F? You don't know. But how do we grade their kids? We grade their kids A through F. Pretty tough standard. But you know how your kids are doing. And if your kids come home and have all C's, you say, hey, what's the problem here? Or they got a couple of A's, a B, and they got a D. We know where to focus. We should have that same grade for our schools. So a parent knows how their school is performing. Every child is going to want their kids in the highest grade school. And what does that mean, Josh? It means competition. Just like Friday night lights in football. I mean, everybody wants to have the best team. I want us to focus on that academically. And this would, we've already passed out of the Senate. If it passes through the House, and I hope it does, I think it's important. In Florida, it's one of the most important bills they ever passed. Some states have not had success. Other states have had success. It's about the standards we put on those schools. But if the standards are fair, and I believe they will be, I think it's an important tool for parents to know what's going on. Because if they see a C out on that marquee as they drive by their school, and you know what? Here's what's going to happen. The schools that get C's aren't going to put that letter on the marquee. But if they get an A, they will. And the people are going to drive by the other school and say, how's my school doing? I just want us to have the best public school system, along with parental choice and charters. We have a total of 5.8 million students in Texas going to school, about 5.2 million in traditional public schools, 300,000 homeschooled, 250,000 in private schools, and 150,000 in charters. One size does not fit all. We also passed, the first time ever, out of a committee, a school choice bill with funding behind it, $100 million that will hopefully give about 15,000 families scholarships. These would be families from everywhere who are 250% of the poverty level. That's $60,000 a year for a family of 4, $80,000 a year for a family of 6. If their kids are in a failing school and they think their school is not serving their child, they would be able to apply for a tax credit and that money would come from businesses. And students would be able to go to private schools. The Catholic schools, the Jewish schools, the Protestant schools, all supportive of this. And again, it's only 13 or 15,000 students out of 5 million, so it's not undermining public school, as that's what some people in the public school monopoly would say. And one other thing about public schools, remember this, the problem are not our teachers. We have to fight with the teachers' unions, but I remember a famous line once said by a union president. They said, well, don't you worry about the kids? And they said, well, when the kids start paying dues, we'll worry about the kids. Our teachers in Texas do a great job. My wife was a longtime school teacher, so I'm never going to be anti-teacher, not after 40 years of marriage. But our teachers do a great job. Yeah, out of 330,000, we have some that aren't. But for the most part, they do a great job. And one of the things we did last session, we reduced testing, STAR test from 15 to 5, so they can teach more and not have to worry about tests. We need to let teachers teach, and we need to take care of our retired teachers, by the way. Our Senate budget has $750 million to pay for the increase in health care costs for all retired teachers. So I'm focused on teachers, but parents have to know how the schools are performing, and we have to have the best schools in Texas.
What about those schools that are underperforming? What do you propose happens to them? If students are leaving them, should they just shut down?
What happens if a business fails? And what do you hear about charters, by the way? Now, look, I'm a big charter proponent. I passed the charter bill last session, and we're adding charters. We have some great charters, but we have some bad ones. And guess what we do to them? We shut them down. I think we've closed 6 charters in the last year alone. And I'm not suggesting we close a public school. We can't close necessarily a neighborhood school. But what you're seeing in a lot of the bigger cities like Dallas and Houston and San Antonio, parents where you can go to any public school if they have an opening, you're seeing parents bypass schools. So you're seeing, particularly at the elementary level, middle school, you're seeing some schools that are only, they're far less than 100% occupied. Parents are already choosing a better school. And so if you have a school that has an F or D, and today we have 8,500 campuses in Texas, K through 12. Of those, a little less than 300, we, the state, call a failure. They've been a failure for 2 years. They don't meet the standards. I'm not so sure all the parents know what schools those are. Many of them do, but not all. So in those schools, we need to turn those schools around. And the way to fix anything, Josh, is to recognize that there's a problem. And so what A through F does, and what some of our other standards do, is they help identify a problem school. And parents, I don't care where you're from, how much money you make, what you do. Parents want their kids to go to a good school. And if you give them the information of how their school is doing, they'll make more demands. So that's a good thing. And again, most of our schools are doing a fine job, and we have many great public schools. But we have by our estimate, we have 150,000 kids in schools that the state of Texas calls a failure. And that's not right.
Still ahead, more of my interview with Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, the debate over taxes, and the future of the state agency in charge of Health and Human Services in Texas, when State of Texas In Depth returns. We know that schools get a lot of their money from property taxes.
Yes.
The Senate has just passed some sweeping property tax cuts.
And people love that.
But how do you balance that tax relief for the people and what schools need for funding?
Well, this is one thing, and you're the first person in the media that's asked me this question, so thank you, because most of the media has reported it incorrectly. We are going, in the Senate budget, we're going to double homestead exemptions from $15,000 to $30,000. Now, why is that important? First of all, people can't afford their property taxes. But number two, the homestead exemption was $15,000 in the 90s when homes were $60,000 on average. Today, the average home in Texas is $200,000, and many parts of Austin much higher than that. But the homestead exemption is still $15,000. It's lost its value, so we want to double it. But we're taking that money out of the schools to double it, but we're replacing that money at the state level to the schools. So the schools aren't losing any money. We're just cutting the taxes for the homeowners. The schools aren't losing a dollar. And that has been misreported by more people in the media that haven't read the bill. So I thank you for asking the question. We're not taking the money from the schools. We're just cutting the people's property taxes.
So we come back next session and there won't be any money taken from schools in this next 2 years?
In this budget we have right now, in the Senate budget right now, I think we're actually a little ahead of the House, and we're not competing with them, but both of us have put significant new money in schools. But my point is, so there we are spending more money on schools, but my point is we're cutting property taxes, but we're sending that, we're going to be sending a check back to the schools to replace that money instead of the people who own the home sending that check. So it's going to work out to about $250 a year per homeowner on average. The other thing we have to do is we have to attack and address the appraisal system and how values continue to go up. The appraisals are sky high. That's a real hard fight. We had a hearing this week that went on for about 10 hours, I guess. And the city mayors and the counties come in, they fight against this. All we want to do is, right now, taxes can go up 8% a year in cities and counties without a vote of the people. And even for a vote, you have to have a petition that's impossible to get enough signatures in the time period. We want to reduce that down to 6%, and we want to have an automatic election. Cities and counties cannot grow at 8% of their budgets can't grow at 8%. That means every 9 years their budgets are doubling. And people aren't getting an 8% increase in their salaries every year. So we have to slow that growth down. That's a tough fight. Cities and counties, powerful lobby, which always puzzles me. Taxpayers' money are being used by cities and counties to lobby against taxpayers. We also have a bill to try to address that issue.
The House has a different idea for tax relief, though. For the first time in the state's history, a statewide sales tax decrease.
Yeah. Look, I'm not going to be critical of the House. I have to get a lot of bills passed over there. And you know, we'll work with the House, and I'm serious about that. I'm not going to be critical of the House, but it doesn't mean I can't give my opinion on a bill and I haven't said anything about any bill, but I think this is really a bad idea. They're going to use $2 billion to cut your sales tax by 0.3%. You're not going to notice 0.3%. we're going to use $2 billion to double your homestead exemption. You know, right now, if you add 2 cents local, you know, our state tax is 6 1/4, and most cities have 2 cents more. So most people, if you buy something in the store for $1, it's $1.08. Guess what? It's still going to be $1.08. It's going to be negligible what you see. It will save some businesses a lot of money who pay you know, millions of dollars in taxes on equipment. But for the average person, folks, I'm going to give you a 0.3% sales cut. Is that the way you want to spend $2 billion? So I've been very clear. We're going to pass property tax relief for homeowners in the state of Texas, and we're going to stand firm on that. And the House has said we're not interested in reducing property taxes. Well, I shouldn't say the House has said that, but one chairman has said that. I think people need property tax relief.
I thought you weren't going to talk about the leadership over there.
Well, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying, you know, I want to be careful. I'm not saying the House has said that. I'm not sure. I haven't interviewed 150 House members, but you know, the chairman who has this tax plan has said we're not cutting property taxes in the House. I think the people of Texas want their property taxes cut, and it was pretty clear in our campaign they want their property taxes cut. And I think we need to do more than we're doing, but we're doing as much as we can get the votes for at this point.
While I've got you here, and while we're talking about numbers, one of the agencies that gets a significant chunk
Yes.
of the budget is the Health and Human Services Commission. Executive Commissioner Kyle Janik has come under fire because under his term, we have a lot of mismanagement, contract issues, the child welfare program is kind of been under fire as well. A lot of people have called for him to resign.
Right.
What do you think?
Well, he's directly accountable to the governor of the state of Texas, and I leave that decision to Governor Abbott. He appoints those commissioners. That's his decision, and I'm not going to suggest to the governor what he should do on that issue. I think it's clear to say we have a lot of cleanup work to do there.
If you were the governor, what would you do?
I never answer those hypotheticals.
All right.
It wouldn't be fair to the governor.
Anything we haven't talked about that you want people to know?
No, I just want people to know how hard their senators are working for them, and in a bipartisan way. You know, we've passed out, as of last week, I think, I'm using round numbers, this past week, we passed out even though we passed out 35% fewer bills out of the Senate, out of committees, we're being very careful. People don't want us to pass a lot of legislation. We are running at a very quick pace. I think we passed 100 bills so far, and 95 out of the 100 have all had bipartisan support. So, you know, we changed the rules on the blocker bill so we could pass some legislation that had been blocked before. But 95% of our bills, or darn close to that percentage, have passed out with Republicans and Democrats. For example, our idea on transportation passed out 28-3. Our homestead exemption passed out with Democrat support. Our franchise tax cut, which we're eliminating the franchise tax for half the businesses that pay for it in the Senate. The House is not doing that. We are doing it in the Senate. They have a little different plan, but we'll work that out. Look, the House is working hard. They're doing a good job, and they've got very smart people. We'll figure it all out. But again, 95% of the bills we passed out of the Senate have passed out on a bipartisan basis, because at the end of the day, everybody understands we need some core plans. Secure the border, lower taxes, provide for quality education and transportation, and then a number of other issues. It's just how you get there. And in the Senate, we're finding a bipartisan way of getting there.
All right. I know you're a busy guy. Thank you
John.
very much for
Thank
being
you.
with us.
Sure.
Still ahead, a new memorial to fallen Texans could soon go up on the Capitol grounds. But this statue doesn't honor the distant past, but wars fresh on so many minds. What makes the Iraq and Afghanistan war memorials different from just about every other statue in Austin?
When shots rang out on Fort Hood, our soldiers and first responders ran toward the sound of gunfire and performed exactly as they were taught to do. Law enforcement officers issued commands and worked together as a team to draw fire away from trapped soldiers and take down the shooter.
It took several years, but this week, victims of the Fort Hood massacre finally received their recognition. On Friday, state and federal officials were on post as the military awarded the Purple Heart Award to 47 service members. That includes the 13 people killed by Army psychologist Major Nidal Hasan in 2009. The Purple Heart Award actually took an act of Congress, since the military initially considered the shooting a case of workplace violence instead of terrorism. State lawmakers want to honor those who have served in our most recent war zones. By the numbers, Texas paid a heavy price in both Iraq and Afghanistan. Nearly 200 Texans killed in Afghanistan, 400 killed in Iraq, thousands wounded. As KXAN political reporter Phil Prazen reports, the movement to erect a new memorial could bring comfort many military families want.
This is actually pretty cool.
This looks like a super modern rifle.
After years of war, Nick Bludow and Jonathan Davey are now civilians and students at UT Austin.
This guy right here.
Nick, a Marine in Afghanistan, and Jonathan, an airman, now walk the Capitol grounds.
If Korea's the forgotten war, then Vietnam is like the underappreciated war.
Yeah, and 50 years ago, they didn't get the reception that they deserved, and it's really nice to see, something like this.
Across the Capitol lawn, memorials remind onlookers of those who gave their all in the service of others. But of all of the statues, one is missing.
Dedicated to the military members from Texas
until now.
That answered their country's call after September 11th, 2001.
The price of liberty is on its way to staking a claim on the Capitol lawn. Lady Liberty leads a soldier away from his family.
The Air Force, the Army.
The 5 branches of the military are stamped on the plan as it honors not only the soldiers, but also the ones left back at home.
It's just a giant symbol of thanks and appreciation. And not only, again, to the Texas veterans and veterans of OEF and OIF, but to their families, which is just important. I mean, they know sacrifice just as well as the veterans do.
Sacrifice, soon written in stone. Phil Prazen, KXAN News.
As far as we can tell, this would be the first war memorial on the Capitol grounds to feature both a service member as well as a family member. The price of liberty will be funded by private donations. Texas lawmakers have to authorize the State Preservation Board to start the process. The idea got unanimous support in the Senate Administration Committee and will now head to the full Senate. 20 other monuments sit on the Capitol grounds. They point out big moments in Texas, U.S., and world history. Of course, some statues took longer to put up. Organizers dedicated the Texas Capitol Vietnam Veterans Monument a little over a year ago. Thank you for joining us for State of Texas In Depth. Remember, you can join us every Sunday morning in the 8:30 half hour.